What's up guys, my name is Ace, and Black Ops 6 is now live in some regions in the world. It's not live everywhere yet, but for many that have taken a trip to New Zealand, we now have access to the game, and in today's video, I wanted to share a list of everything that I can find that changed from the beta build of the game till launch, and there's quite a bit of little adjustments here, and let's just dive in with one of the biggest things that they mentioned in their blog post as far as changes go from beta till launch, and this is a change to aim assist. Now, you guys might remember from the beta, they actually nerfed aim assist in really close quarter situations. And with this, what they did is they just cut off your aim assist entirely if you got too close to your target. So your aim assist slowdown would cut off at about 2 meters, whereas your rotational aim assist would cut off entirely at 2.8 meters. And after receiving feedback throughout the beta, this is actually a piece of feedback I provided, they have made an adjustment to how they're handling this aim assist nerf, and instead of having it cut off immediately, where it works at full strength, but then you move 10 centimeters forward and now it's suddenly off entirely, which was a very jarring experience. Now they've made this more gradual, so your aim assist is still weaker up close than we're used to in Call of Duty, but it's there. Even at point blank range, you're still getting aim assist slowdown, and you're still getting rotational aim assist based on my testing. However, it is weaker in close quarter situations, and that strength will ramp up to the normal values as you get further and further away from your target. Now, I don't know what the exact threshold is where you do reach that full strength aim assist as you're backing away from your target. Since it is such a gradual change, there doesn't appear to be an obvious point where it's like, yes, this is now where it's full strength. But based on my experiences this in actual public matches against other players, I do have a couple hours of playtime now, which is still early days and my opinions may evolve over time. But my initial impressions of this is it definitely feels like that aim assist is quite weak, even outside of just point blank engagements. Like even if I'm thinking like 10 meters or so, it feels like it's a bit weaker in many engagements, since many engagements in this game will be in close quarter situations. However, it's at least always there. It doesn't just suddenly turn off like it was in the beta. And I'm actually totally on board with this change. I quite like it now. I am definitely having a harder time aiming at enemies in close quarter situations, and I'm fine with that. It's going to take a little bit of time to adapt to, but this will be increasing the skill gap in close quarter situations between controller players at least. Now, as far as how this aim assist nerf will interact with mouse and keyboard players, I think it's a little too early to tell at this point. But so far, my initial impressions are it definitely feels weaker up close, and I'm cool with that because it is more gradual and it feels more natural than it did in the beta. After that, another thing they changed from beta till launch is they improved the pistol and dedicated melee swap speeds. And while I don't have pre-patch data from the beta, I'll just show you guys what it looks like post-patch. And just based on my experience so far while playing, this feels much more natural and well suited to the pace of play in the game. In the beta, when I was playing, every time I swapped to a pistol, I kept thinking like, man, this is way too slow for how fast things move in this game. And yet, with my playtime so far, I haven't even noticed this at all, and therefore it just feels natural, and I think that's a good sign. I think that means that it is more suited to the pace of play in this game. Now, on top of that, there was also a slight increase to weapon butt melee attack speeds, and while this is something that I don't personally use too often, you can see the animation is quite quick now after launch. As for the next thing they talked about here, this is adjustments to sway, bob, and overall weapon motions to improve point of aim when entering aim down sights. And this is something that Sledgehammer had to fix last year with Modern Warfare 3, and those changes didn't auto-apply to Black Ops 6, so now it's something that Treyarch has to fix as well. But it's definitely not like a big issue here. They do mention there will be additional improvements coming with Season 1, so I'm thinking they might get rid of that little wiggle when you get aim down sight. One thing I do want to point out though is for you snipers out there, this did not seem to apply to sniper rifles, at least in the launch state of the game. As you can see here, every time I aim down sight, my point of aim when I first get aim down sight is in a different location, and the sway is immediately applying as I'm aiming down sight. Now, perhaps they're going to be changing that with the additional improvements coming in Season 1, or perhaps this is an intended design for their sniper rifles in order to keep quickscoping in check. We'll have to wait and see on that one, but I just wanted to point out the snipers do have this off-centered point of aim in the game's current state. After that, another subtle but nice change that they made from beta till launch is they improved the depth of field across all weapons. And essentially with this in the beta, with some guns, it seems like parts of the gun would be in focus and then other parts would be out of focus. And particularly with a lot of guns, their front sight would be out of focus when you were aiming down sights. And that's the part that should be most in focus, if anything, not the back of the gun. It's the front sight that matters most. And let's just have a look at a direct comparison here with the C9 on Derelict in this situation with nice clear lighting. And as you can see in the beta, the front sight is just a little bit blurry. In fact, it's more blurry than the rear sight is. Whereas at launch, you can see everything's a lot more in focus with the C9 across the board, not just the front sight, but the entire gun in general. And this is excellent to see. That was one little thing that just felt slightly off in the beta, and they have fixed that. After that, when it comes to the new corner slicing mechanic, where as you approach a corner, if you're aiming down sight, from first person at least, your character model will actually lean a little bit around that corner. For many people, they didn't actually like that feature, so they've now added a toggle option so you can just turn that off entirely. And my first thought here was then you'll be at a disadvantage because your character's not going to be leaning around the corner for the enemy player to see. So I wanted to see what this looks like from the enemy's perspective if you are trying to corner slice around a corner. And this is what it looks like when that enemy has corner slicing on. And when the enemy has corner slicing on, it doesn't look like they're really leaning around the corner at all. So then I tried toggling this off and did the same thing. And as you can see, nothing has changed here. So this confirms that this corner slicing is a first person only thing, and your third person character model won't actually be leaning around the corner as you might expect based on what you're seeing in first person. So with that in mind, I would say don't hesitate to turn this off if it's something that you're just not enjoying with the game. If you don't like the look of it, just turn it off and you won't be at any disadvantage as far as how much of your character model you're exposing as you're peeking a corner. Now, that's not the only option they added to the game since the beta. Another one that I'm really happy they added and I will absolutely be taking advantage of is they added an option to set the hold time in order to perform a dive or slide depending on your slide dive behavior settings. So what this means is if you have the tap to slide, hold to dive setting enabled, you can now change your activation delay to short, medium, or long. So if this is on long, you have to hold down that button for a longer period of time before initiating a dive with that setting active. Whereas if it's short, it's actually going to be a shorter period of time and it'll be a bit more responsive to get into a dive. Now, personally, I'm going to be setting this to long because I don't want to dive too often. I want it to be there and available to use, but it's not something I ever want to accidentally activate. So by setting this to long, it's going to be a lot less likely that I accidentally dive when I just meant to slide in that case. Now, obviously, this setting is going to come down to preference. Perhaps you want it to be a bit more responsive with that dive, so you want to go with the short option, or maybe you want to keep it on medium, but for me, long is definitely the way to go with this setting. On a similar note, they also added a new intelligent movement option to set mantle assist angle from tight, medium, or wide. So with tight, you're going to have to be aimed pretty much directly at that object you want to mantle on, whereas with wide, it's going to mantle on objects that are a little bit to the side of you, which does sound a little bit annoying to deal with. Now, let's move on to the maps section here. This is something that I actually picked up on just looking at the map overviews that they released last week. So most of these things I picked up on, but they revealed a bit more and actually showed what it looks like in-game as far as changes to the maps from beta till launch. So let's start this off with Skyline, and the first thing to point out here is the hot tub area. They have created a step down, which will give you a whole lot more cover around that B domination point, also that hard point location there. You've got way more cover to utilize. Additionally, on this back spawn portion here, they've just added a piece of cover, like a little generator or AC unit or something, when you immediately mantle up to this area, so you're not going to be immediately exposing yourself to danger as long as you stay left on that area. Then on the C domination point, they just added a couple flower beds on the outside edge of the map, and that should just allow you to break out a spawn a little bit more effectively and challenge those people that are locking you down from the bar portion of the map. And then finally for Skyline, on the long hallway, they've added a couple pieces of cover, one on each end, that allow you to at least have some coverage while challenging across the hallway there, which I think could improve the flow on that area a little bit more. As for Scud, on this section right here, they've just added a small plate. It's actually kind of hard to see, but they've added a tiny plate just to prevent as much bullet penetration coming through on this particular location here. Next up, you can see a couple of the points of cover have just moved around on this side of the map a little bit. Really minor changes here, but there are a couple little adjustments. Then, very importantly, on the main power position area, they didn't make any massive change here, but one thing they did is they just broke the concrete up a little bit, which is going to allow for a slightly more bullet penetration if you're shooting on the low side of that. So it'll make it a slightly more dangerous place to be. As far as the overall coverage that you get or concealment that you get out of this, that has not changed at all. It's just that bullet penetration value when you aim a bit low. Then for Rewind, they added a truck to this spawn area over here, which is just going to provide a little extra cover as you're coming out of spawn. Then on that same spawn side of the map here, they've angled the truck a little different, and you can also see at the front of this semi, they've added some pallets there. I think they have a different image of that in a second, but you can see the angle of the truck has changed. With this area here, pushing up toward the mid-map area on the one edge, they've just added a box here. That's something I picked up on in my video as well. And here's that pallet that they added in front of the truck just to provide a little bit of extra cover there. And there we go. Those are the changes they outlined to the beta maps in the blog post. It turns out that's not a comprehensive list. There were a couple other changes, like this barrel on Derelict, for instance, that wasn't in the beta. It is in the launch of the game. And on Protocol, they shifted a few points of cover around here and added this one box in this area right here. And with that out of the way, let's talk about headshots a little bit. This is something they didn't really talk about, at least in great detail, in their blog post. But it is something where I had data collected throughout the beta, and I can compare it to launch. And while most of the values for most things remain the same, when it comes to headshots, especially with assault rifles, we saw a noticeable change to the headshot damage multiplier. In the beta for assault rifles, our headshot multiplier was only 1.1, which meant for nearly all of the full auto guns in the game, headshots did nothing to change the number of shots to kill. Even if every single bullet hit them in the head, it wouldn't change the number of shots to kill. Whereas now you can reduce the number of shots to kill in the maximum damage range with our assault rifles by landing 2 headshots mixed in with body shots in most cases. In the case of the AS Val, you need 3 headshots mixed in. But that is a notable improvement. Headshots aren't entirely useless by default with assault rifles now. However, SMGs didn't appear to change here, so headshots are still effectively useless unless you're using the CHF barrel on the SMGs. And this leaves us with one final section on the video, and this is just going to be things that I feel are different from beta till launch, or I've just noticed are different, but they haven't been outlined in any blog post or anything. And the first thing I want to point out is performance. On PS5, my performance is significantly better than the beta. I'm not getting those little stutters and hitches like I was in the beta. In fact, I don't think I've seen any of them so far with a couple hours of playtime, so that's promising. Connection-wise, things are pre-launch right now, technically, where I'm playing in my region, and while a bunch of people are doing the New Zealand trick, I think it's a little early to judge connection too harshly, but I have noticed some, like, shoot first, die first situations, but at least my shots seem to be registering nicely. Then when it comes to audio, things definitely seem more clear, and I've noticed I'm picking up on footsteps a lot more effectively than I was in the beta. And I don't believe they've actually boosted the volume of the footsteps. Instead, I think what we're seeing is just that improved tech that they've brought to the game that wasn't fully launched in the beta, but now it is available at launch with Black Ops 6. And I'm not referring to the personalized audio that you can pay for. I haven't looked into that yet at all. I will cover that down the road. But just the base audio is definitely more clear based on my experience so far. And I believe that's what's making it a bit easier to pinpoint footsteps, even through walls in some cases. Now, it's early days. I don't want to share a strong opinion at this point as far as the footstep balance goes. It definitely doesn't seem as loud as something like Modern Warfare 2 did, for instance. But I am hearing footsteps a lot better than I was hearing in the beta, and perhaps this will end up meaning Ninja will be a crutch perk, at least for higher skilled players in higher skilled lobbies. Time will have to tell on that one. It's just something I noticed pretty quickly as I've been playing through the launch build of the game. And with that, that is going to wrap it up today's video on a bunch of the changes that took place from beta till launch for Black Ops 6. And with that, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the changes that we're seeing from beta till launch so far? Are you guys generally happy with the changes they made, or not so much? Are there certain things that you're not happy with that maybe didn't change from the beta? Or are there maybe things that you actually preferred how they handled them in the beta? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.